And welcome all, it's Mr. Callen here. I'm going to shoot out a quick video to you before you start up your homework assignment. This is mostly geared toward my A group students who might want a little extra help as they begin this assignment. But B group students, feel free to watch it again, fast forward, rewind. We've already talked a lot of this stuff. And my virtual only students watch this as well. Hey, you've seen where we've been, adding and subtracting positive and negatives, integers, fractions, decimals, mixed numbers even. Well, it's time that we get into multiplying and dividing negative integers, and you probably already realize where that's heading, because sooner or later we're going to multiply decimals, fractions, mixed numbers. We're going to divide positive and negative decimals, fractions, and mixed numbers. I'm going to start with a little compare and contrast. Mrs. Oliver, I believe, did a previous video with this, but I just want to go over it again because I feel it is that important. Now, I want you to think about what these both have in common. Start with the obvious. Yes, they both have a -9. They both have a -5. In fact, maybe that's the most important part, the fact that they both have negative numbers. You might also attach the common word compute, which is a fancy word for saying do the math, do the add, subtract, multiply, and divide. Now, speaking of doing that mathematics, you'll notice over on the left side, we are multiplying repeatedly -9 times -5 multiplying, while over on the right side, it is the add problem. So for instance, if I were to draw it out, plus minus folks, you draw 9 minus signs, 5 minus signs. Oh, well snap, there's no zero pairs. So we're going to put everything together. In other words, we are deeper in debt, or you number line folks, you go deeper underwater. Meanwhile, let's remember, please, what multiplication means. Multiplication means repeated addition. In other words, a whole lot of -5s. In this case, we have 9 sets of -5, -5, -10, -15, all the way down. But wait a second. This does not say just 9 sets of -5s. It actually asks for the opposite of all those. So the key word here is not zero pairs, it is opposites. So imagine, what's the opposite of that first -5? Well, that would be +5, Mr. Callen. And the opposite of the next -5 is +5. And the opposite of all those -5s would be a whole lot of +5s, leaving us with +45. See, with multiplication and division, doesn't matter who's bigger, doesn't matter who's smaller. We're not even looking for zero pairs, really. What we want to know is 9 sets of -5. Oh, yeah, is it asking for the opposite or not? Now, I'm going to leave this up here. I believe Mrs. Oliver may or may not have gone through this, but I would encourage you, pause your video and go back with the signs. For instance, if I know 6 times I go down 9, down 9, down 9, down 9, down 9, down 9, I imagine that I am below water or in debt. So I'm giving you all the numbers. I would encourage you, pause, figure out, are the signs positive or negative? And remember, you're always thinking increase, decrease, or opposites. Pause, come back when you're ready. So let's take a look at number 2. 3 times 10 means we keep going up 10, right? But wait a second. This is asking for the opposite of going up 10. In other words, we're going to go down 10, down 10, down 10 for a final answer here of -30. So let's keep on going with that. 9 -4s. Picture all those -4s. Aha, but wait a second. We are not asking just for 9 sets of those. We're asking us to then take the opposite, and all those -4s would then turn into +4s, which therefore means, not that you have to write this, but that would be a +36. Number 4, 3 sets of 7 goes up 7, up 7, up 7. But wait a second. We're asked for the opposite of all those positives, or go up, which means we are going to go down. 3 sets of 7 is 21, but the opposite of that would be -21. Take a look at number 5. Now imagine 3 sets of negative set. No, wait a second. We have the opposite of all those negatives, which means number 5 would be going up. Now, with that in mind, I would encourage you guys, go ahead and pause again. Take a look at your thoughts for numbers 6 through 10. Come back when you're ready. So number 6 is asking us to split up -2 into two groups. Well, I just put -1 in each. The other way to think about that is the opposite of all those positives. Now for number 7, this one's a little trickier. See, we're asked to split up -10 into two groups, -1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But wait a second. It doesn't just ask us to split up -10 into two groups. It then says take the opposite. And so the opposite of all those minus signs turns into plus signs. That's a +5. Now, if you owed $49 and you split it into 7 parts, as you can imagine, you and all your friends would still owe money. If you owed $6 and split it up into 2 parts, your initial reaction might be saying negative, but wait a second. The opposite of all those negatives, you guessed it, turns us back to positive. Last but not least, imagine 24 split up into 3 groups. I'm not going to draw all these out, so let me hit a ... But wait a second. This then says take the opposite of all those positive symbols, which means I'm going to come back and I'm going to change all those to minuses. Okay. The opposite of all those positives would be negatives. Pause if you want, go back, rewind, and listen to it again. But remember, we're not worried about zero pairs here. We're not worried about who's bigger or who's smaller. We are worried about, do they ask us to split something up or multiply something? And then, are there any opposites involved? Now, I think what I'll do is I will save these notes for Monday, but maybe I'll just go through it real quick in like 2 minutes or less. It just kind of brings together everything we've been working on. For instance, if you're adding numbers with the same sign, like 2 plus 3 or -2 plus -3, well, guess what? If they're the same sign, there's no zero pairs. You're going the same direction. So add everything together and then keep the sign. Down 2, down 3, or down 5. On the other hand, if you're adding two numbers and they're different signs, I know there's a plus symbol in between, but look, -5 plus 6, there are zero pairs. And so you're going to subtract or take away those zero pairs. That leaves us with 1. And then wait a second, are you above water or below water? Do you have money or do you owe money? And in this case, we would have money. If I switch that problem to 6 plus -5, nope, let me switch it to 5 plus -6. There are still zero pairs to take away, but in this case, we're more below water than we are above, or we are more in debt than having money. Meanwhile, subtraction, many of us change subtraction into adding the opposite, but sooner or later, folks, I would like you to look at -9 and see that we are losing money without having to change it to add the opposite. But for now, I think that's going to help us. The same thing with subtracting a negative. Hey, Mr. Callan, you take away all the debt you want, because I'm going to be happy. If you take away my debt, then I think my money's going up. While we really care about zero pairs, we don't care about zero pairs with multiply and divide. Multiply and divide is really all about the opposites. For instance, if the signs are the same, the answer is going to be positive, yes, but why? Well, you can see the opposite of going down 5 would be going up 5. If you have $12 of debt and you split it into 4 parts, but then you say take the opposite of that debt, well, that's having money. Meanwhile, if the signs are different, it's always negative, and we don't care which one's bigger. The opposite of all those +4s are -4s. Or the other way to think about this one, 3 times you go down 4, lose 4 yards. Loss of 4, loss of 4, loss of 4. That makes a loss of 12. If you split $16 of debt into two groups, then there's going to be debt in both groups. If you split 16 into two groups and then take the opposite of having $16, that explains why it's negative. It doesn't matter who's bigger or smaller. We're not so much worried about zero pairs as did it ask us to take the opposite. All right, let's go ahead. Pause if you need to, rewind if you need to. I'm going to do some guided practice real quick. In fact, if you have the patience for a longer video, I will do the entire left side with you. We'll start off with number 1. And we're asked to solve the equation where 2 times 8 is 16, but wait a second, this isn't 2 8s, this is 2 negative 8s, this is 2 losing 8s for a negative 16. Meanwhile, for number 4, you might be tempted to say 5 negative 5s is negative 25, but wait a second, that doesn't ask us for 5 sets, that asks us then to take the opposite of all those negatives for a final answer of positive 25. For number 7, I can tell you right now that 12 13s is 156, but that doesn't ask us for 12 sets of 13. That asks us then to take the opposite for a negative 156. Again, instead of going up 13 over and over again, this says take the opposite. In other words, you're going down 13 over and over again. Number 10, let's take a look at a power. Remember what a power means. It means any number multiplied by itself. Now, 12 sets of negative 12 goes down a long way. But hold on. We're not just asked for 12 sets. We're asked to take the opposite of all those negatives, which means instead of going down to down, down to down, down, we're going up, 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 up. Moving right along. Now we're asked to evaluate an expression. Multiply negative 4 times some number m, but they tell us what the numbers are here up in the directions. And evaluate does mean multiply or divide or add or subtract, whatever the operation is, all the way down to the final value. That's the root word of evaluate. So if m is negative 6, 4 times we go down 6. I'm tempted to say 24 negatives, but this then asks us to take the opposite of all those negatives, which puts us to positive. Number 16, negative 2 times some number squared, and m is still negative 6. I'm going to go ahead and write this out. Negative 6 times itself. Now remember, usually we go left to right here, but in this case, the order of operations tells us that we should do our powers first. And so, 6 groups of negative 6 is negative 30. Wait a second. The opposite of all those negatives would be positive. But don't forget, we had negative or the opposite of 2 groups of that. 2 36s is 72, but again, the opposite of all those positives gets us back to negative. Now, I know some people will look at the sign and compute that sign immediately and say, okay, the opposite of a negative is a positive, and then the opposite of that positive gets us back to a negative. And then you just worry about the digits. But I wanted to go with the order of operations just to guide you through. One more problem, negative 12 times some number n times some number p. N is 3, p is negative 4. Again, all multiplication is equally strong, so we should go left to right here. 12 sets of 3 is 36. No, no, no. The opposite of all those positives is negative 36. Now let's go ahead and multiply that. I can tell you right now 36 fours is 144. But again, we want the opposite of all those going down, in other words, going up. Now, yes, I know you don't have to write the plus symbol, but you may if you wish. Now, at this point, folks, up to you. If I were you, I would pause the video, continue on with the front side, and then we'll go to the back. Back is some division. G is equal to 52 split into 4 parts. Now, I can tell you 52 split into 4 parts is 13, but wait a second. There we go again. The opposite of that positive will be negative. Now with that in mind, let me go ahead to both of these problems. 120 split into 12 is 10, 36 split into 12 is 3. But let's review what we got here. The opposite of all those going down is going up. Therefore, number 25 will be a positive 10. But if I split negative $36 into 3 parts, you'll notice that each of those parts, no, I should have split that into 12 parts. So imagine splitting that into 12. Well, the only way to get down is that each goes down 3. Now, if that doesn't make sense, you can always go back and say the opposite of positive is negative. But I really want us to be able to see that if we split up debt into parts, then we still owe money. Either pause and continue on with that section, or let's keep on rolling. Again, asked to evaluate where E is negative 36. You can see it right here. F is 4, G is negative 3. So negative 36 will substitute in for the numerator. Meanwhile, F will substitute in 4. Again, if I split up debt into 4 parts, it's not just 9, it's that each person owes $9. Now, number 34 can kind of catch some people off guard. This is asking us to take the square or second power of 36 negative and then to divide it by 4. So remember what a power means. It means a number times itself. If I were to multiply 36 times 36, shoot, I can't do that in my head. Hold on. I'll just save you time since I already calculated this last night. Literally, I can't do that in my head. Don't be afraid to write stuff out. And wouldn't you know, I can't find my work. So I'm going to write it out. First of all, I know that the opposite of a negative is a positive, right? So then 36 multiplied by 36, let's just multiply that piece by piece. 6 times 6, 36, carry the 3. 6 times 3 is 18, plus 3 is 216. Let's go ahead and hold our place value. I usually put an X. Some people put in a 0. 3 times 6 is 18, carrying the 1 now, and 3 times 3 is 9, plus 1 is 10. 6, 9, 2, 1, 1,296. But again, the opposite of a negative times a negative, the opposite of a negative will get us to a positive. Now we go ahead and divide, and we might as well do the sign first. If you have a bunch of money and you split it into parts, then you have a bunch of money, right? Meanwhile, let's go ahead and do 1296 split into 4 parts, which leaves us with 0. Good. 4 goes into 9 twice with 1 itty bitty part left over. And 4 goes into 16 a lovely 16 times. Final answer would be positive, with the emphasis that the opposite, whoops, shouldn't have done that. Let's try that again. That the opposite of a negative is where that positive symbol comes from. Let's wrap it up with one more problem, ladies and gents. And before you get too frustrated with the big numbers, oh man, there we go again. Well, that's okay. We just calculated it out. Meanwhile, I believe F was 4 and G was negative 3. 4 negative 3 is correct. So let's go ahead and write that out. Now remember, we already calculated this guy. Right above, 1,296. And the opposite of a negative times a negative gives us a positive. Meanwhile, 4 sets of negative 3. 4 sets of negative 3 is negative 12. I guess you could look at it as the opposite of a positive is a negative, but we can see the negative 12 right here. Let's go ahead and divide 1296 by 12. And I went through that fast, folks, because to be frank, the most important part of this is the answer positive or negative. See, if you split up a bunch of money into 12 parts, you're going to have a bunch of money. But wait a second. The opposite of all those positives ends up being negative. So again, what you'll see is, as you continue with this assignment, it doesn't matter who's bigger or smaller. 1,000 is bigger than 12. But that's not what we're asking for. We're not saying, are we above water or below water, so much as what is the opposite of going up and up and up? And that would be going down to that negative 108. So go ahead and finish this up, and then I'll tell you what. Let me give you the answers before you take the quiz. You want to know if you're doing it correctly or not. So pause, come on back when you are ready. Now, it would be really silly to just copy down somebody else's work and not really check to see if you know it. So here are the answers for the front page. Pause, come on back when you're ready for the second page. Second page, pause and come on back. So that's really all I have for today, folks. There's a bunch of practice to be sure that you're ready. Don't forget, when it comes to integers, that when you're adding and subtracting, the zero powers matter. It matters if you have more going up or more going down. But when you're multiplying and dividing, it's all about opposites. Split things into groups for division, or multiply by adding repeatedly. That's what multiplication is. And then ask yourself, what's the opposite of a positive? What's the opposite of a negative? All right, folks, take care. Do well. You got a quiz coming at you. Hope you do well. See ya.